Excuse me, Chair, your microphone?
Good morning. I'm calling to order the Cuyahoga County Community Development Committee meeting.
Cheryl,
It is Monday, November 15th, 2021. It's a little after 10. Would you please call the roll, please, ma'am?
just as a reminder, this meeting is being recorded and live streamed on YouTube. Calling the roll, Ms. Stevens,
Present.
Mr. Jones,
Here.
Ms. Simon. Ms. Simon is absent at the moment. Mr. Gallagher,
Here.
Ms. Baker. Here. We have a quorum. Also like the record to reflect that Ms. Turner is also in attendance.
Thank you. Do we have minutes to approve from our last meeting? Has everyone had a chance to glance at them?
Yes, I'll make a motion to approve our minutes from the July 12th meeting.
Thank you.
Second.
Second by Mr. Gallagher. All in favor? Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? The minutes are approved. Is there any public comment, Matt?
Madam Chair, no one signed in for public comment.
Okay, thank you. Then we will go to the matters referred to committee. Could you please read the first resolution?
Resolution number 2021-0256, designating agreements with various eligible institutions as public depositories of active and interim funds of Cuyahoga County in the total deposit amount not to exceed $1,215 million for the period August 1st, 2021 to April 1st, 2024, in accordance with the Uniform Depository Act of Ohio.
Thank you. This morning, I have asked the county treasurer to come and speak to us. I believe, okay, so some of you know that I have this belief that if you do business in Cuyahoga County in a substantial way and want to do it with Cuyahoga County, the government entity, that we need to take a look at how that relationship benefits both parties. Doesn't mean that we'll say no. It doesn't mean that we have anything to change. It just means that we need to look in detail. In the last year, we have begun to develop a better relationship, we believe, with KeyBank, and we want to look at how lenders are working in this marketplace. So bringing the depository agreements before us, we need to look at why we do them the way we do them, if there is any wiggle room, and we need to pick your brain, sir, so that we can understand what's in the best interests of Cuyahoga County, and if we have any new and thoughtful ideas. So this isn't about having a problem with anyone. It's looking to see if lenders can do more in Cuyahoga County without much additional work on either party's part. So if you would explain to us today what state law is, what best practices have been here at Cuyahoga County to date, and how we make decisions about who receives what balance they can be received up to, that would be appreciated.
Thank you. Good morning, Madam Chairwoman, members of council. I have a very brief presentation that I want to provide, and then I'll be available for any questions that you may have. All right. Okay. The Ohio Revised Code, Section 13553, authorizes the county treasurer authorizes the Board of Commissioners upon recommendation of the treasurer to designate depository agreements for our active monies. And those active monies are cash that we need on hand just to pay bills. We also have inactive monies which we invest in the public market. And the commissioners also have the ability to provide more than one depository agreement if the institutions are conveniently located and they do not have the wherewithal for all of our available cash. Okay. In terms of details for Resolution 20256, these are for the 2022 depository agreements that end in 2024. We have 7 depository agreements at this point: Dollar Bank, First Federal, Huntington National Bank, JP Morgan Chase, KeyBank, PNC, and U.S. National Bank. We have seven. Got it. All right, thank you. We have seven depository agreements currently, but we only have cash in approximately 3 banks. The 3 banks that we are mainly concerned with today are KeyBank, PNC, and U.S. Bank. The depository agreement process is really quite simple. We let the banks know that that our depository agreements are up for renewal, and we give our local banks the opportunity to tell us if they would like to be a depositor with Cuyahoga County. The banks then have to make the determination as to how much of our cash they can actually hold, because due to state law, they have to collateralize anywhere from 50% to just over 100% of the funds that we have in their bank at any given time. So we provide a boilerplate agreement that has been reviewed by the law department, and the banks tell us how much they can indeed hold for us. So as a matter of business, KeyBank, as an example, has to have collateral of at least $350 million in order to be a depositor for Cuyahoga County. KeyBank is our main depositor, which I will touch on a little bit more. But because of that, anytime we have money in a bank, you have to have a depository agreement. So that is any bank, even if it's just $1. If it's $1 of county money, you have to have a depository agreement. All right. In terms of the depository agreement with KeyBank.
I just wanted to ask one question to the last point before you move on. As you know, we've talked about this. I served on a credit union for 7 years, and we knew how much we could accept from any one depositor based on the assets. When you use collateralized, just for clarity, or as a layman, are you saying the total assets of a particular bank? Are you using the term collateral? Or are you simply saying their deposits?
The bank. It's a great question, Councilman. What happens is the bank has to purchase investments of at least 50% of our depository agreement and hold it. So it's not free money for the bank, right? There's a certain expense for them, opportunity cost for them.
It's not as simple as saying this bank has this many deposits, and you must have you cannot accept more than a certain percentage in relation to the deposits. You are referring to the investments.
Right, because the bank, by state law, has to have collateral in order to hold our money. So that's a protection for the public.
So investment takes the form of.
Ooh, what are the
Have
investments?
to be I don't remember that it has to be an investment. I thought they could restrict accounts that they had or income that they had made, as well as use collateral as restrict the collateral. I thought there were 2 or 3 options for them, and they had to show that they were that liquid and have a written agreement with us on what was going to be restricted.
They have, as far as I know, they have to have investments. I can get that clarified, Councilwoman. That is my understanding. They must have investments equal to 50 to 100% of what the depository agreement states, which is why we give them they tell us how much they can hold.
So it's been many years since I was all in your business in relationship to this. And so what we need to know is how those restrictions can be honored.
Okay.
And if it's written into our agreement or it is just following state law. Because given the fact that some of the smaller lenders across the state are collateralizing smaller counties, we know that they are going to have more than one way to do that.
I will get that clarified.
Are there any other
clarity
questions?
around the deposits as well? Like I said, my experience was if our credit union had $8 million in assets and deposits, no one could give us $20 million in a deposit because they would have practically owned the bank. So there was only a percentage of whatever the credit union had in deposits that was acceptable from any one depositor. I'd like to know if that plays a factor.
So do we want to know what the deposit base of the three primary lenders are, Mr. President?
Probably more relevant for the smaller ones, I'd like to know as well.
Just so we get an understanding of their universe.
Excellent. All right.
While we're asking questions, we renew these every 4 years. Is that what you're telling us?
We normally renew these every 4 years. We have the agreements in front of you are timed so that they end the same time our main depository agreement, our master agreement with Key Bank ends, so that we've got the ability to fully evaluate the relationship and then make our determinations.
And does the state require that it be a 4-year agreement, or have we decided that?
We've gone with the maximum,
So we
which
could
is
have
4
a
years.
2-year agreement as opposed to a 4-year agreement, or a 3-year agreement as opposed to a 4-year.
We have the ability to do so. It's up to.
Absolutely.
Just because it's, I'm just learning, I think, more than I'm understanding. The first four that you have listed, you said that they are not something we will be discussing. Why are these listed and why wouldn't they be part of the conversation?
We have 7 depository agreements, and that's so that we've got maximum coverage, Councilwoman. So as an example, if for some odd reason PNC failed, we could move our funds into another of these banks. So in terms of practice, it's good to have more than what you physically have assets in.
So it's a kind of a safety net.
More of a safety net, right? And there's no magic number. I mean, from an operation standpoint, 3 is probably enough in terms of our cash movement and our daily activities. But these are just, again, just in case we need it.
May I ask, why were these not as the top tier? Is there just reasons that the bottom 3 are better choices?
It's the banks themselves tell us how much they can reasonably hold. Key Bank has been our main depositor for at least since my appointment in 2015 and sometime before that. PNC was an inherited relationship back before the county government restructuring. Auto Title used PNC as their main bank, and so we didn't want to create any. I'm assuming we did not want to create any operational hiccups when the government changed. And then U.S. Bank primarily serves as our custody account, and so we're holding our investments with U.S. Bank, and they're very good at that particular
Excuse me,
service.
when you say custody account, what does custody account mean?
The investments that we purchased, they are held at Key Bank. Sorry, held at U.S. Bank. I'm sorry, U.S. Bank.
Okay, so when we have custody accounts, it's for investments we've made in.
Of our inactive monies. So that would be Farm Federal Credit Bureau, any municipal investments that we have, that sort of thing. Anything that is in our existing investment policy, which mirrors the state policy. So essentially government-backed securities.
May I have a follow-up?
I'm sorry?
I may
Yes,
have a follow-up.
please.
There is no advantage to working with larger banks like Huntington and JP Morgan over the 2 smaller ones that we are now with? Does it matter if one has more resources than another when we have investments?
We evaluate a bank's total resources that they can provide to us in the RFP selection for the master contract. So PNC was evaluated, Huntington, I'm drawing a blank as to who else, JP Morgan,
First Federal?
No, first,
Small one.
Dollar Bank. I mean, so we evaluated, I believe, 7 to 8 banks? 7 to 8 banks, and Key, as I will talk about, was the winner, was the clear choice. Sure.
Okay, please continue.
Thank you. I'd like to just go into a brief description of the Key Bank relationship. Thank you. All right. As you know, again, Key Bank serves as our main depositor. They maintain 29 separate bank accounts over the treasurer operations, sheriff operations, and development operations. And there's a host of bank accounts that have to be kept separate due to various code reasons and or operational efficiencies. In terms of services, Key provides, obviously, we're running payroll, all of our ACH payments, wire transfers, branch services, vault, electronic deposits, and the retail lockbox, which, as some of you may have remembered this discussion before when we first brought the Key Bank agreement to you. But the retail lockbox is a differentiating factor for the county because that retail lockbox allows us to have significantly less staff to process our tax bills. And we're talking not non-mortgage, 350,000 tax bills. So if we look at it just in terms of resources, multiple years ago, maybe a decade or so ago, there were 7 or 8 people in our remittance department running remittance machines. We now have 3, including a supervisor. He takes the bulk of those activities and processes it for us, submits it to us in an electronic file, and we can get the information posted as quickly and as efficiently as possible. And where that comes into play operationally is the sooner that we can collect and post, the sooner the settlement, which the fiscal officer submits to the taxing authorities, goes out. So that money, as soon as the tax collection starts, the clock is ticking because the school districts and the cities especially school districts, are depending on those funds. So that was a major differentiator.
So there was a time savings, and what type of time savings? You said there's a staff saving.
There's a staff savings
for
for sure.
example, did it take the 7 or 8 staff that did the reconciliation, it took them 15 days as opposed to 5 days with Key?
Councilman, I do not have visibility on operations from 10 years ago. I know in terms of bodies, what we spent. I can only imagine that the staff that Key, the resources that Key can throw at it would be higher than the 7 or 8 that we had those many years ago. And in terms of days, I can't quantify that just now. What I can tell you though is this: we are not late on the settlement, and that is, just to give you an example, first half settlement is about $1 billion that has to get out. And so that,
I understand
that
the
helps
significance.
us. That helps us significantly.
None of the school systems would operate
Without it.
without it. Because what is it, 67 to 70% of every real estate tax dollar heads
Approximately
for a school
60%.
system?
Yes.
So they can't operate without it. It is their primary stream of income.
Mm-hmm.
And when we make mistakes, it damages them if we make it to their good or to their bad. So getting it done correctly is incredibly important. I understand that. I just want to understand better what it is they bring to the table, and it's not just a reduction in our staffing. Hopefully, it's some efficiencies in what we provide.
Absolutely.
So is there a way to find out specifically if there was a range of savings? So, for example, can you go back to 2014 and find out, it was probably 2011.
Probably if you want to look at prior government to now, probably 2011, 2010. Yes.
So I know that there were a whole lot more staff.
Yes, there were.
And so we reduced the number of staff. And did we increase how quickly the funds were available?
I would try to get some numbers on that as well.
I'm sorry, proceed, please.
And Madam Chair?
Yes.
And again, that was 350,000
No.
number of tax bills, or?
Well, there's 550,000 parcels, but approximately 200,000 come to us via your mortgage. So we're processing 300 to 350,000 tax bills every half year.
Okay, so, and I'm just giving this back to you, make sure I'm internalizing it properly. In the past, we've had 7 to 8 employees who had to handle those 350,000 tax bills and process it within a certain window of time.
Correct.
So that our school boards and other entities can function. So, by turning this over to Keith through the RFP process, you reduce your employees to 3, who may have some level of impact on that, but they are now delegated to providing that service. They get it done in an efficient manner, using their vast resources, and that has been one of the factors as to why they have actually won the RFP. Are there other banks who have the capacity or even the willingness to engage in the lockbox service?
Based on the RFP responses, Key is the only bank that operates a local lockbox.
They're the only one with capacity of all the banks.
Yes. JP Morgan? JP Morgan had a lockbox, but it was in Detroit. And for various reasons, we did not think that would be the best option for Cuyahoga County. And just to give you an example, the tax bills that we submit, that we mail out to our friends and family, they are produced locally. But in terms of quality control, we've got to make sure that those bills that are produced locally can be processed by our own remittance machines, and we still have two remittance machines. But also, we need to make sure that our retail lockbox can also process those. So, I did not believe that sending tax bills to Michigan, waiting for them to be tested, and then waiting them to be overnight, I did not think that would be something that would be in the best interest of Cuyahoga County. Again, because I'm always thinking, can we get the processing done as quickly as possible so that settlement happens. And to be quite honest with you, Councilman, there's a settlement, but then prior to the settlement, we advance money that we've collected to the taxing authorities. So they're not waiting for the entire 100% of the collection. We try to get it out over a couple specified dates prior to the final date, which is the settlement.
So you get it them in a timely manner and just reimburse ourselves.
Correct. And Key Bank, just as an example, they underwrite that huge dollar amount that we need to get out. So they'll cover us for approximately 3 days. Yes. 3 days. So even if the money's coming in, Key Bank will essentially give us credit for what we've advanced.
So it all makes sense, just from the perspective of the RFP process and bidding and competitive bids. It's not really competitive when no one else really has the capacity, and Key Bank is the one who is taking that contract. So one, we're thankful that they do have that contract, but at the same time, it's not necessarily competitive in that context, knowing that they're on capacity. How effective have we been in years past, if you have that historical knowledge, when we were doing it ourselves, 7 or 8 employees?
I don't know.
Don't know.
Anything I give you would be speculation, and quite frankly, in terms of institutional memory, we are pretty bare from 2011 prior. The best that I could do would be to try to find out when we actually dispersed the settlements and the advances. You know, how soon within the month of February did we do that? That'll give me some indication as to how we did But with 7 or 8 people, there's, errors, there's mistakes, there's returns. Key Bank also gives us the ability at times to send them a file that might have some corrections. They can just process it quicker, to be quite honest with you. And that's saving overtime as well. Because I imagine with a staff of 7, still with a staff of 7 or 8, or even 9 or 10, 350,000 bills coming in, and they come in pretty quickly in the month of January. We probably 80% of our collections comes in that last month. Okay. So that's, in terms of volume, that's quite a hill to climb.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Treasurer, do we ever have a tutorial or a pre-RFP session where we talk to lenders maybe 6 months to a year in advance about what kinds of systems would qualify to handle our business, so that we might see more diversity in the responses? Because one of the things that we're about to learn is that there are other banks that perform better in our market pace than Key when it comes to giving back or finding ways to facilitate borrowing from our constituents on very important things like home ownership and home rehab.
If you're, Madam Chair, so if the question is, do
I
we
want
have
more
the
responses.
ability
Yes.
to
Talk to
maybe
people
change?
about whether they could
Absolutely.
bid more responsibly.
Absolutely. But I will say this, the RFP that we provide and the sheer number of questions is probably 70? 70, okay. 75 questions that are pretty exact. So just to give you an example, if a bank tells me that they do not have a retail lockbox, I mean,
Probably
we
don't.
know it. We know it based on the responses.
So could you give Trevor or Joe, our staff, a copy of your RFP? So
Absolutely.
take a look at it and understand better what you're looking for, because it makes no sense to make suggestions or guesses if they're not in line with what you need, because you've got state law, not
Right.
just our practices or resolutions that council has passed to make sure that we're doing this correctly. So I think we may need to have a better understanding from our staff of what's going on.
Okay.
Okay. Other questions?
Just to echo what Councilwoman Stevens just said, Madam Chair, that this body has worked aggressively to improve community development, to make capital accessible to the residents of this community through mortgages and small business loans, and our ability to compete with this contract is a component of that. And we're learning through this, and we've had this conversation, so not, but certainly are learning how important this retail lockbox component is to really a bigger picture. So that it's a conversation that we just want to continue to have and learn more. The county's capacity to do what they do in terms of retail lockbox, what we've done in the past. Other banks just continue to have that conversation and just go from there. So, thank you.
Okay.
I'm almost done. Key provides, so the services that I listed before are on the presentation. Key provides these services at a fee that is offset by our earnings credit on our accounts. Key's fee less our earnings credit meant that we paid $0 in 2021 for 2020 expenses. So that is all the banks that we're working with offer earnings credit, but based on the way that we've been able to manage our cash, and we have a fantastic cash management team of 3. Patrice is here representing them. Because of the way we manage the cash, we were able to essentially zero out our expenses for 2020. Now, we will do this again in 2022 based on interest rates and what happens. We will see if we can duplicate this. But that was a major coup, I believe. And then finally, in terms of the Key Bank relationship, at any given time, we have approximately $40 million in the bank. That's active money. Sometimes there's a tendency to conflate the inactive with the active. Key only has $40 million. The rest of our portfolio is in the hands of our public investments that we've already talked about, the government-backed securities. Okay.
Let's talk about PNC.
All right. In terms of PNC, and again, I'll be brief so I can take questions. PNC maintains our auto title fees and our credit card payments for taxes. Again, PNC already had a relationship with auto title, and so once the county reorganized, we kept the relationship so there would be minimal disruption in the auto title's operation. 2020's expense, which we don't pay until January, February of the next year, was $41,000. And as of Friday, we had about $8.2 million in the bank. And that is generally about where we keep the account. Again, we're always trying to minimize the fees that are charged to us. Finally, in terms of U.S. Bank, U.S. Bank has a couple of different features to this relationship. They also collect electronic payments that are made for taxes, as well as any online payments. And as I mentioned before, U.S. Bank is our custody agent for our investments. And their expenses, including the custody, was $117,000, which we paid this year. And on average, it says November 12th, pretty much on average, it's about $2 million sitting with U.S. Bank at any one time. So in summary, again, the depository agreements we have to have these in order to have a relationship with the bank. Even if we ever was in a situation where we had to switch banks, we would immediately go to a bank that we have a depository agreement with, and then we would start the process from there. So the depository agreements, we have 3, but we keep 7. We keep 7 updated just for the protection of our assets, and which is part of my responsibility.
Can you tell us how expenses are calculated for these fees? Because with significant deposits, one would hope that the fees would go down. We're seeing a significant.
I'm going to bring our cash management officer, Patrice Brooks, for that.
I rescue you for
Yes.
this one.
Thank you.
Banks calculate service charges.
Excuse me, can you speak into the microphone, please?
Banks calculate service charges P times V, so price times volume. So it depends on what we're charged per item for everything that we do. It also depends on the earnings credit rate that those banks are paying us. So it depends on how much activity we're running through all of those banks that determines our service charges. And by design, we don't keep a lot of money at certain banks if the earnings credit rate isn't that high.
And that varies based
That
on
varies.
the market?
It varies on the bank, yes, correct.
Okay, so can we see an example of that when you turn over some information to us? Because we're pedestrians in your career
No,
field.
that's okay.
Would you like to see
Yeah, just an example for one of them, how it's calculated.
Sure.
When you turn some stuff over to Joe and Trevor for us to
Absolutely.
take a look at.
Absolutely.
Okay. Does anyone else have questions for Mr. Murray? Mr. Murray, final words from you. How soon do you need this legislation to move through the system? I
If
might
I could,
have a few more questions.
If I could have it passed on second reading, that would be fantastic.
And you're going to have to talk to us some more.
Okay.
You may have to talk to us outside of the official committee, okay?
I think I can do that.
Okay. If we have no further questions, I'd like to thank you for coming
Thank you.
before us today. Mr. Frank Ford, I'd like to bring him to the podium today. As everyone knows, since I joined County Council's team, I have a concern about how lenders are performing in this marketplace. And on Friday, in no relationship to what the legislation we saw, Mr. Ford produced a report that was presented at a conference. So if you would introduce yourself for the record and tell us about this report that has significant community lending
Excuse me, Madam Chair.
numbers.
I'd like the record to reflect that Ms. Simon is in attendance, and also we need to vote on the legislation.
We're not ready to vote.
Okay, I just wanted to be clear. Thank
Nope,
you.
I'm not ready to vote.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chairwoman Stevens, and members of council. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. Frank Ford, Senior Policy Advisor at Western Reserve Land Conservancy. The study that I produced on Friday was based on data from the federal government for Cuyahoga County. There were 70,000 loan applications in 2020 from 389 banks for loans in Cuyahoga County. What I did is I looked at this from a number of different perspectives. I looked at general trends. I looked at who were the top 15 lenders who made loans for home purchase and home renovation, particularly focused on areas that are underserved, have been traditionally underserved in Cuyahoga County. That would be the east side of Cleveland and the east inner suburbs, the city of Cleveland generally also. Oh, thank you for that, yeah. I also then did something unique. I did a 5-year look. What I said so far was 2020. But I also went back 5 years, and I looked at 4 banks specifically. 3 of them have community benefits agreements with a national organization called the National Community Reinvestment Coalition. And those agreements, I think I'm going to give round figures here. Fifth Third's commitment was $32 billion. KeyBank's was around $16 billion. Huntington's was around $16 billion. Those were the 3 banks. These were multi-state agreements. So these weren't just Cuyahoga County. They weren't even just Ohio. They were multi-state. I think roughly a half dozen states. They weren't the whole country. The purpose, the explicit purpose of these agreements they entered into 4 and 5 years ago was to improve their lending to these underserved communities like the east side of Cleveland, the east inner suburbs. The last thing I did as part of my analysis, I looked at all the banks who have deposits in Cuyahoga County, who take Cuyahoga County residents and businesses' money and put it on deposit. And I looked at what was the ratio or percent of those deposits that each bank loaned back into the county. There were 29 banks that do hold deposits in Cuyahoga County, and I looked at the top 13, and 99% of all deposits are held by only 13 banks in Cuyahoga County. And I looked at the investments that they made back to the county. For today's presentation, what I was going to do is focus specifically on that deep look, that 5-year look at 4 banks. I mentioned 3. Huntington, KeyBank, and Fifth Third have these national agreements. The 4th bank I added was U.S. Bank, and the reason I did that is because just recently U.S. Bank has engaged in discussions with that national organization, the National Community Reinvestment Coalition, that it might enter into a community benefits agreement going forward. So I thought, let's take a look at what have they been doing for the last 4 or 5 years. So I'm going to go right to first. Oh, there's actually a pointer here now. Oh, I was asking about a pointer earlier, but it won't show up on the screen, so it's not going to help me. Sorry, hold on a second. Bear with me for just a minute. Okay, so the first chart we're looking at here is Cuyahoga County at large, 5 years, and the green line is, this is home purchase loans. The green line is Huntington's progress in making home purchase loans over the 5 years. The blue line is Fifth Third's. The red line is KeyBank's. The U.S. Bank is, I guess that's sort of a purple line at the bottom. The first thing that really stands out is in reminding you that why did these banks enter into these agreements? Explicitly to improve their lending in Cuyahoga County and underserved communities. The trend sort of jumps out at you. Huntington, over the 5 years, steadily increased its home purchase lending. Fifth Third steadily declined its home purchase lending in Cuyahoga County. KeyBank did increase for the first 4 years, and in discussions I've had with KeyBank, they attributed that to their acquisition of, was it First Niagara Bank, I think, in New York State, that gave them an enhanced mortgage lending staff capacity. But in the last year, then they've declined again. U.S. Bank has just remained flat. There's been no real change in their lending in Cuyahoga County. Then I drill down to next is Cleveland. Cleveland, you see similar trend. Huntington, a steady increase. There's a decrease from Fifth Third. It's not as substantial a decrease as we saw in Cuyahoga. There's the same slight increase from KeyBank for the first 4 years. Then there's a decline in this last year. And again, U.S. Bank, there's really no change in their lending. And then the east side of Cleveland, where population is 82% African American. I believe that almost every census tract is low to moderate income. Now, there isn't really any significant increase by any of the 4 banks in the 5-year period. However, it's worth noting that Huntington is clearly has the highest volume of home purchase lending, nearly 5 times what the other 3, which you see grouped at the bottom. Then I looked at the east inner suburbs, which is 51% African American, and I forget what the population or the low moderate income, but certainly this is the other majority African American region in Cuyahoga County. And as you can see, Huntington has a significant increase in loans they made to the east inner suburbs. There is, with Fifth Third, a pretty significant decline in lending over the 5 years. KeyBank has that same trend where there's an increase for the first 4 years, but then they dropped in 2020. And U.S. Bank's performance in home mortgage lending, purchase lending, really didn't change at all, and they ranked pretty low. Then I looked at home repair lending, did the same type of analysis. First is Cuyahoga County overall. And here you see Huntington with a pretty, first of all, let me point out the KeyBank has been historically the top home repair lender, home improvement lender in Cuyahoga County. And they began that way very clearly, dramatically. You can see the difference at KeyBank way at the top. And Huntington, KeyBank, and, Huntington, Fifth Third, and U.S. Bank were grouped towards the bottom. There's this dramatic increase from Huntington, and there's an equally dramatic decrease in home repair lending from KeyBank over the 5-year period. Now, I do want to point out one thing, and this is something that's a sort of an overarching observation. In 2020, this is COVID-19's first year. And what I also found as a general trend is that applications for home repair lending did decrease countywide, all lenders, about 20%. And I attribute this to no scientific way for me to say for sure, but I think homeowners did not want contractors in their homes during COVID-19. I cannot think of any other logical reason for this, but across the board, and so you'll see 2020, every one of the lenders I looked at, of these 4, and it's really true for all the lenders I looked at, 2020, home repair only, not home purchase, but home repair, the applications dropped. So we're going to see a drop in home repair loans for all the lenders I looked at. So it's really what's significant is what happened for the first 4 years. And again, you see Huntington increase, KeyBank decline, and you see, now there is a Fifth Third increase here, which is not insignificant. It's actually fairly significant that they went from, looks like they tripled, I think in my notes up there, which I can't read from here. Fifth Third did increase. The decline in the 2020 year, it's hard to say, what does that mean? Would they go back up? I don't know for sure. US Bank, as before, stayed flat. This was Cuyahoga County at large, and I'm going to drill down to Cleveland. Similar pattern, KeyBank's home repair lending dropped, Huntington's increased, and at this level in the city of Cleveland, Fifth Third and, thank you. Fifth Third and US Bank really stayed pretty static and flat with very low numbers in the city of Cleveland. East side of Cleveland, again, pretty similar pattern, dramatic drop in KeyBank's home repair lending in the east side of Cleveland. Similar, pretty dramatic increase from Huntington on the east side of Cleveland. And again, US Bank and Fifth Third are very low numbers at the bottom. I want to interject for a moment, reminding you, it's worth keep reminding, what were these agreements for? To induce them to increase their lending. I have to say, it's not only disappointing to see KeyBank's decline, it's also to see Fifth Third in a number of categories not increase during the whole 5 years. And now, you would not expect, US Bank didn't enter into an agreement yet. So you might expect, well, US Bank didn't have any motivation or inducement to increase over 5 years. But I'm not sure what explains the fact that I see in too many of these slides, Fifth Third looks almost like US Bank. It's as though they didn't have an agreement. Last, East Inner Suburbs, similar trend, KeyBank. KeyBank didn't drop that much in the first 4 years, but they did decline. Huntington, of course, did significantly increase in the first 4 years. And again, we see Fifth Third and US Bank, very low numbers in the East Inner Suburbs, and not really improving that much at all. Small dollar, let me just stop for a moment. Chairwoman Stevens, did you want me to stop and take questions? I could look at the small dollar home purchase lending, depending on time.
I do.
Sure.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for this
Yes.
report. Very interesting. Just a quick question, which will actually bleed over to the rest of your presentation. These investment agreements that you're describing, and the purpose is to increase lending, and what's the quid pro quo in these contracts? So what do the financial institutions get in return for this commitment?
These are usually connected to or concerns that the bank may have that their federal regulators are going to, I'm hesitant to say punish, because the Federal Community Reinvestment Act does not have a lot of teeth. Its main teeth comes into play when a bank wants to merge with another bank, wants to acquire another bank. The federal regulatory agency that regulates that bank could say no. And so that's the teeth that's the quid pro quo. So when an organization like National Community Reinvestment Coalition challenges a bank and say, we think you're not doing well enough, their motivation is to position themselves so that, because they're always merging and buying other banks, they want to position themselves to look good in the eyes of that regulator. That's really the way it works. It comes down to that.
And so at the time, if I may, when they do merge or, there's a acquisition, do they look at these stats that you're,
They look at my stats?
Not your stats, but similar stats.
They do, yes. They actually do. I know that the Federal Reserve Bank of Cleveland has a whole team of people that will do that. The comptroller of the currency is another major one. They do that. Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, FDIC, they all have staff that will analyze that data and take that into consideration. Yeah. Yep. So the other thing that I did was, because it's been a topic of discussion over the last several years about access to loans in the east side of Cleveland, for example, or the east inner suburbs. And I just want to say an example of this. So in the east side of Cleveland, before the foreclosure crisis, back in 2005, before the foreclosure crisis hit hard, let's say, the median home sale price on the east side of Cleveland was $80,000. Now, that may not sound like a lot, but it dropped a few years later down to like 10. It's only come back to 35,000 on the east side of Cleveland. These are arm's length sales. The east inner suburbs, I don't have that right in front of me, but I want to say it's higher in the east inner suburbs. but it's maybe in the 65,000 range. It has not come up to fully where it was pre-foreclosure crisis. So what this means is you could have a home in the St. Clair neighborhood, the Slavic Village neighborhood, Glenville, that's actually in good shape. It's a decent home, but the market price is not going to be more than 45, 50,000. In the east inner suburbs, it could be 60, 70. And if you think about it, loan officers are usually paid by commission. It's human nature. Are you going to work on a $50,000 transaction, spend your time on that, or are you going to work on a $250,000 transaction out in the outer suburbs? Where do you want to spend your time, and where are you going to get your compensation? So an issue has been, how do we work with banks and induce them to come up with strategies to try to meet that need? And there have been some interesting things that banks have come up with. One is, and this was recommended by housing advocates, that banks, instead of compensating their loan officers strictly on the size of the loan, they have a floor where the loan officers can be compensated for, let's say, at least $100,000 as a floor to induce them to do those loans that might be $40,000, $50,000. So, but for this purpose, I've done this mainly for housing advocates that are interested in this, to take a look at, well, what did these 4 banks do with that? I should have shown this first because this might have explained what I just said. If you look at, these are the 5 regions, that's his outer suburbs, west inner, west side of Cleveland, east inner and east inner suburbs. And you see the percentage of, the loans that were made in those regions to the number of arm's length sales. And if you look at the far right, you see that the percentage of loans that were made is very small compared to the actual sales that took place. What that suggests is that a lot of these sales at 20, 30, 40,000, investors are paying cash, or they're using a hard money lender and they're not using a mainstream bank. And they're assuming that I will rent this property out in 5 years, I'm going to get my money back. So there's definitely an access issue for people in the east side of Cleveland, to a lesser extent in the west side of Cleveland and the east inner suburbs.
Because
Yes.
we're limited on
Oh,
time.
yes, I do want to be.
Can I get you to skip to race and lending?
Yes.
And then bank deposits?
Yeah. So the 20,000-foot level overview is that you can see, if you look at home improvement lenders, home improvement loans, African Americans are denied approximately 2 times more often than whites. With the home purchase loans, it's a little less than 3 to 1, or about 3 to 1. That's not an unusual finding. That's been similar for a number of years. I thought, well, let's look at what happens if you have a high-income African American and compare their ability to get a loan compared to a high-income white. So I did this by 5 income groups: low income, moderate, middle, and high income. Excuse me. And the most striking finding here, well, in all cases, the African Americans are denied more often than whites. At the lowest income level, there's closer parity. They're not that different. The most striking thing is when you get to the high income African Americans on the right, they are denied significantly more than the high income whites, but they're also denied more than the moderate and middle income whites, which I think is the most interesting finding of this. I did a look at home repair, home improvement loans, and did this a little differently. I looked at the 5 regions that I've been looking at: outer suburbs, west inner, west side, east inner, and east side. The trend here is that as you look at higher percent African American populations, the access to the home repair loans declines, which sort of stands out there. Do you want me to quickly say something about bank deposits before I close?
Yes, please.
Last thing I did, I'm sorry, tables are not quite as, this didn't lend itself to a simple line chart. So basically what I looked at is, again, 29 banks that do hold deposits in Cuyahoga County, 13 of those banks have 99% of those. These are the 13. I ranked this according to the size of their deposits. Key is the largest with 30. This is actually not 30 million. You have to add 3 zeros. This is the way the data comes from the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. So it's 30 billion in deposits. PNC is next, CBNA Citizens, then Huntington, Third Federal, Fifth Third. Then at the far right, I looked at what is the percent of the deposits that they hold that they then reinvested and loaned back into Cuyahoga County in the form of, now I limited this to home repair and home purchase on 1 to 4 family homes. And there you see KeyBank is very low, only about 1%. Huntington is, I guess, the highest at 7, a little more than 7%. Of the banks that are the large, a Third Federal, I guess, is higher than that. Of the 3 banks that had community benefits agreements, those are in the red font, then Huntington would be the largest of those 3. But, and then down at the bottom, we have First Federal of
Mr. Ford, can you
Lakewood.
speak into the microphone?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, thank you very much for the reminder. At the bottom, we have First Federal of Lakewood and First National Bank of PA. They're loaning at disproportionately large amounts of their deposits in Cuyahoga County. If you ask me to explain that, I don't know the answer to that. So I should probably stop because I know you have time limitations.
Would you please summarize for us your findings?
Yeah, the summary would be, I think there's, part of the summary would be, of course, the general race issue, where there is still a disproportionate denial rates, even with high-income African Americans. So that's certainly significant. But I suppose the other big thing is that when I took a 5-year view of these 3 banks that have community benefits agreements who committed to improving lending in underserved communities, there's a very big difference in how they responded to that. Huntington, and by the way, I'm not, this isn't a paid advertisement for Huntington. I don't even bank at Huntington, actually. It's very clear. They dramatically improved their lending or else maintained a high level in some categories, while KeyBank declined, and as did Fifth Third, either declined or remained low. I find that disappointing. Now, all 3 of those banks, by the way, have issued press releases nationally saying, we met our goals. We met our 16 billion, our 32 billion. And this is the question with all these agreements. They've been around for 30, 40 years, ever since the Community Reinvestment Act. Big agreements, big commitments. And at the end of the day, you have to ask yourself, well, where did that money go? This was an attempt to show, did the money reach at the street level? Did it reach the neighborhoods that we work in, that you live in? And so that's a disappointment from my perspective.
Thank you. Do any of my colleagues have questions before we close out today? Thanks for your time, Frank.
Thanks for the opportunity. Thank you.
Are there any other matters before this committee? I think we need to pay attention to who's doing what in our communities, the ones that we serve. If we want to see it, there is more and more knowledge across the country that says that the more people who own homes of their own, the stronger and healthier financially your community is. And so if there is a way for this committee and this council to help encourage those things, I want to try to do it through the Community Development Committee. So thanks for your patience and your participation today to my colleagues. And we'll be following up with you again, Frank. And of course, Mr. Murray, if you would follow up with Khalil, since he's here today, that would be greatly appreciated. Thank you all. This meeting is adjourned at 11:05.